If someone had told me 10 years ago that Franklin and I would still be this close, still calling each other for last-minute weekend plans, still laughing about high school nonsense, I probably wouldn't have believed them. People drift apart after graduation. That's just life. But somehow, Franklin and I stuck together like glue, even when everything else around us kept changing. We met in our sophomore year, when he transferred into my math class and sat behind me. He tapped my shoulder during the first lesson and whispered that he had no clue what was going on and would copy my homework if I didn't stop him. It wasn't exactly a charming introduction, but he had that mischievous grin, the kind that made you feel like being in trouble might not be so bad if he was there too. We became friends almost instantly. Franklin was always the bold one, the kind of guy who went skydiving on a whim, got tattoos in foreign countries, and dated freely without overthinking things. He lived in the moment. I, on the other hand, was the quieter half of the equation, the planner, the observer, the guy who carried sunscreen and a backup charger in his bag. Somehow the mix worked. We balanced each other out. But what Franklin didn't know, and what I never had the guts to tell him, was that I'd been in love with him for years. I figured it out sometime in college, during a weekend trip when we shared a bed in a cheap Airbnb and I couldn't sleep. He had one arm thrown over my side, breathing softly, peacefully. I remember staring at the ceiling all night, trying to make sense of the storm building inside me. By morning, I knew. I also knew I'd never say a word. Our friendship mattered too much to risk. So I stayed quiet. Through girlfriends and one night, flings on his end, and the occasional awkward blind date on mine. I watched him fall for other people, and I waited for the feelings to go away. They never did, which brings us to last Tuesday. I was finishing up a shift at work when my phone buzzed with a message from him. Franklin. Thinking of going up to Ravens Peak this weekend. You in? No context, no details. Just like him. I stared at the message for a full minute, heart already starting its nervous drumbeat. Ravens Peak wasn't just a day hike. It was an overnight camping spot, 3 hours into the mountains, totally cut off from cell service. Just the two of us, surrounded by trees, silence, and all the feelings I'd been burying for nearly a decade. I almost said no. I typed out some excuse. Too much work, not feeling great. But before I could hit send, another message came through. Franklin. Could use the company. Just been a weird week. That did it. He never said stuff like that unless he really meant it. And truth be told, I missed him. We hadn't hung out one-on-one in a while, not since life got busy and the seasons started slipping past faster than I wanted to admit. So I deleted the draft message and typed a simple, I'm in. Now, 3 days later, I'm standing in my apartment, shoving thermal socks and energy bars into a backpack, trying to ignore the fact that my stomach feels like it's full of bees. I keep telling myself this is just a trip between two friends. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing should happen. But deep down, I know something's shifting. It's in the way he called me less on the phone last night. Voice softer than usual. It's in the way I hesitated before saying yes. And it's in the part of me that's terrified of what might happen when the only thing between us is a campfire and the quiet. Franklin pulled up in his beat-up Jeep Wrangler at exactly 7 a.m., window down, sunglasses on, and that same cocky grin on his face. Morning, sunshine, he called, leaning over the passenger seat to push the door open. You bring snacks? Because if you forgot snacks, this friendship is over. I rolled my eyes as I tossed my backpack into the back seat. Relax. I brought trail. Mix, protein bars, and gummy worms. You're welcome. He gave an approving nod. Now that's why we've been friends for so long. The drive up to Ravens Peak was all winding roads and early morning mist. Classic indie rock played from his ancient stereo, mixed in with bursts of our usual banter. We talked about the guys from high school who were now balding and married, with 3 kids. And Franklin told me about a disastrous Tinder date where a girl brought her dog to the bar without warning. She said if the dog didn't like me, it wasn't going to work. Turns out the dog hated me on sight, he laughed. I chuckled along, even though something twisted a little inside me. Franklin's stories always involved women. Beautiful, wild, emotionally unavailable women. Each one more chaotic than the last. I sometimes wondered if that was on purpose. A way to keep things surface level, uncomplicated. Maybe the dog just had good instincts, I offered. He laughed again. Wouldn't be the first. I stared out the window, pretending to admire the view, when really I was trying to push down that familiar ache. I hated the jealousy. It felt childish, irrational. But it always snuck in when he talked about dating, reminding me of all the things I couldn't say out loud. When we finally reached the base of the mountain, the temperature had already started to climb. Franklin jumped out and stretched like a cat, arms up, shirt riding just high enough to show a sliver of skin above his waistband. "Man, this is going to be amazing," he said, slamming the door shut. "Fresh air, no phone signal, no noise, just us. And the trees. Just us." My heart picked up pace. We started the hike, backpacks secured and boots crunching against dirt and rock. The trail wound upward, flanked by towering pines and birdsong. The sky was clear, blue stretching endlessly above us. I tried to focus on the beauty, the way the light filtered through the branches, the way the mountain air felt cleaner in my lungs. But every time I looked ahead, there was Franklin, walking just ahead of me, confident, relaxed, unaware. Halfway up, he turned and grinned. "It's too hot for this." He peeled off his shirt, slinging it over one shoulder. I swallowed hard and looked away, pretending to check my water bottle. "You're awfully quiet," he said as we continued. "You okay back there?" "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just enjoying the scenery." He looked at me over his shoulder, a curious glint in his eyes. "Scenery's not bad, huh?" For a split second I wondered if he knew. If that was a test, a tease, a joke I wasn't sure how to take. But he turned around again before I could read his expression, and we kept climbing. I let out a breath and kept my eyes on the ground, willing my thoughts to settle. Out here, it was just us. No city noise, no distractions. Nothing but the trees, the path, and the sound of my heart thudding way too loudly in my chest. By late afternoon, we reached a clearing tucked between tall pines, just high enough to catch a sliver of the valley. View below. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Franklin dropped his pack and stretched, letting out a satisfied groan. "This is perfect," he said. "Flat ground, good view, and I don't see a single bear, yet." I laughed as I set down my gear beside his. "Great, you've just cursed us." We got to work, slipping back into the easy rhythm that always seemed to find us. Franklin set up the tent while I gathered firewood. By the time the sun had dipped below the tree line, the fire was crackling and the tent was up, slightly. Crooked but standing, it didn't matter. Nothing felt rushed or pressured. Just simple, easy. Franklin handed me a metal camping cup filled with something strong smelling from his flask. "To surviving another wilderness adventure," he said, raising his own cup. I clinked mine against his. Barely. The drink burned going down, but the warmth was instant. We sat on a fallen log facing the fire, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. The stars started to appear, scattered across the darkening sky like glitter someone had thrown too hard. After a few sips, Franklin leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever think about settling down?" he asked casually, like he was asking if I wanted more trail mix. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, sometimes." "Just sometimes?" He turned his head toward me, eyes reflecting the firelight. I shrugged. "It's not really that simple." He nodded slowly, as if turning something over in his mind. "Yeah, I get that." I didn't ask what made him bring it up. Part of me didn't want to know, especially if it involved some girl back in the city who had just started to mean something, but I was also afraid he'd say nothing at all, that it was just small talk, and somehow that would sting even more. We passed the flask back and forth a few more times, laughing over dumb stories from high school, like the time he convinced me to sneak into the gym pool after hours and we both got caught soaking wet by the janitor. Franklin had slipped out the emergency exit and left me to deal with detention alone. He still swears it was unintentional. I still don't believe him. "I've missed this," he said quietly, after the laughter faded. "Yeah," I replied, not trusting myself to say more. A long pause stretched between us. The fire popped softly. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Franklin's gaze lingered on me longer than usual, long enough that I felt it like heat against my skin. I looked at him, and he didn't look away. His expression was unreadable. His lips parted like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. Was it the drink? The nostalgia? The stars? Or had I imagined the whole thing? The moment passed as he looked away, tossing another log on the fire. The snap of the wood made me flinch, dragging me back to reality. By the time we crawled into the tent, the temperature had dropped. I zipped my sleeping bag up to my chin and curled into myself, teeth starting to chatter. "You freezing too?" Franklin asked from the other side of the tent. "Kind of," I admitted. There was a rustling sound, and then his voice. "We could share yours, like old times. Remember that trip to Blue Ridge when we forgot one of the bags?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, I remember." He slid in beside me, pulling the bag closed around us. Our legs tangled awkwardly at first, until we found a comfortable position. His body was warm against mine, and I could feel his breath. "On the back of my neck, I won't steal the blanket this time," he whispered. I smiled in the dark. "You better not." But I couldn't sleep. Not with his arm resting lightly against my side, not with the memory of that look he'd given me near the fire. Something was changing. I could feel it, and I didn't know whether that scared me or gave me hope. The sleeping bag rustled as we settled in, bodies awkwardly pressed together in the confined space. Franklin's back was against mine at first, but after a few minutes, he shifted, his arm brushing lightly against my side. Then, his leg, then his breath near my cheek. It was too much and not enough all at once. I stared at the nylon wall of the tent, counting each inhale and exhale, trying to calm the storm inside my chest. I could feel the warmth of his body, the rise and fall of his breathing, the quiet hum of night outside the tent, crickets, wind, the occasional snap of twigs in the distance. Then, out of the silence, I heard him whisper, "Have you ever wondered if we were meant to be more than just friends?" The words landed so softly I almost thought I'd imagined them. My heart stopped, then kicked into overdrive. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stayed still, staring at the tent wall, trying not to give myself away. Franklin exhaled, slow and deliberate. "I know you heard me," he murmured, voice lower this time. I rolled onto my back, the sleeping bag pulling tight across my shoulders. I looked up at the ceiling, where the shape of the tent curved like a dome above us. What do you mean?" I asked, barely managing to get the words out. "I don't know," he admitted, shifting beside me. His voice was unsure but steady. "I've just thought about it. About us. About what it would be like. Not just as friends." I turned, my head toward him. In the dark, I could only see his outline, but he was looking at me. I felt it. That gaze again. Soft, searching. "You've thought about it?" I repeated, my voice almost cracking. "Yeah," he said, a faint smile in his voice. "Not all the time. Just moments. Little ones. Like when you laugh at something. Dumb, I say. Or when you get that look in your eyes when you're trying to figure something out. Sometimes I catch myself wondering, what if?" I swallowed hard, the confession settling over me like snow, quiet and heavy. "Franklin," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I've been in love with you since college." He didn't speak. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would ruin everything," I went on, the words tumbling out. Now, years of silence cracking open. "I didn't know how to say it without losing you, so I just buried it. For years. Watching you live your life, date people, laugh like nothing was wrong. And all the while, I broke off, the pressure in my chest overwhelming. Franklin reached out and touched my arm. Just that. A simple, grounding touch. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I think part of me didn't want to know. I was afraid of what it might mean." I turned fully to face him. We were so close now, our faces inches apart. I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath, mixed with campfire smoke. "I'm not asking for anything," I said, voice trembling. I just needed you to know. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. Then he pressed his own forehead to mine, letting the silence speak for both of us. I don't know what this is, he whispered, eyes closed. But I want to find out. With you. I closed my eyes too. For a long time, we stayed like that. No words, no pressure. Just breathing in the same small space, hearts thudding in quiet rhythm. His hand found mine inside the sleeping bag. Fingers laced together. Not tentative. Not unsure. Just right in. That moment, the years of fear, longing, and silence melted into something soft. Something fragile, but real. Whatever came next, we'd figure it out. Together. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the emptiness beside me. Franklin was gone. For a moment my chest seized in panic. The sleeping bag was still warm on one side, but his presence was missing, like the echo of a dream fading too quickly to catch. The early morning light filtered through the nylon tent walls, and somewhere outside, I heard the rustle of leaves and the sound of a camp stove being fired up. I sat up slowly, brushing sleep from my eyes and bracing myself for the worst. He regrets it. He's already trying to undo it. He's pretending it didn't happen. I forced myself to breathe, one step at a time. When I crawled out of the tent, Franklin was crouched over the portable burner, poking at a small pan with scrambled eggs in it. His back was to me. Shirt on again. His shoulders tense. Hey, I said softly. He didn't turn around. Hey, hope you're hungry. I stood there for a beat too long, unsure of whether I should sit beside him or just keep standing until he said something that explained what the hell this was now. Eventually, I sank onto a log near the fire pit, hugging my knees and watching the smoke curl into the morning air. He handed me a paper plate with slightly burned eggs and a granola bar beside it. Thanks, I murmured. Sure, he said, still not really looking at me. The silence between us was thick, not angry, just heavy. I hated it. I hated that something so tender, so raw and real, could suddenly feel like a secret again. I wanted to ask him, what are you thinking? Do you regret last night? Was it a mistake? But I couldn't force the words out. Not yet. He stirred his eggs with his fork, poking at them like they were going to give him an answer. Then, without looking up, he said, I didn't expect to feel calm about it. I looked at him. His jaw was tight, but his voice was soft, measured. What do you mean? I asked, my voice more fragile than I wanted. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. I thought I'd wake up freaking out, he said. But I didn't. I woke up feeling safe, like something just clicked into place. That stopped me cold. Safe. That word. That word meant more than he probably realized. I've spent so much of my life trying to be the guy everyone expects me to be, he continued. Girls, dates, locker room jokes, the whole thing. But with you, last night, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I just felt like myself. I stared at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. You're not scared? Oh, I'm terrified, he said with a small laugh. But it's not the same kind of fear. It's not fear of you. It's fear of what this could mean, what it says about me, about us. I nodded slowly. You don't have to define anything right now. I'm not asking you to. I know, he said, eyes fixed on mine. That's what makes this feel so different. We sat in the silence again, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was quieter, softer, like a room we both stepped into, at the same time without needing to speak. I don't know what this is, he said, echoing his words from the night before, but I know I don't want it to be nothing. I felt my throat tighten. You're not nothing to me, I said. You never have been. He reached over and touched my hand, just briefly, before pulling away again, not because he was ashamed, but like he was testing a new language and didn't want to speak it too loudly just yet. We finished our breakfast in the stillness of the forest, surrounded by birdsong and sunlight filtering through the trees. It wasn't resolved. It wasn't perfect. But something had shifted. Something had begun. The drive back was quieter than the ride up, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that feels earned, like both of us were still swimming in everything that had happened. Every mile we put between us and that mountain felt like a quiet echo of something sacred we weren't quite ready to let go of. Franklin drove with one hand on the wheel, his other resting casually on his thigh. His window was cracked open just enough to let in the cool morning breeze, and the radio played something soft and familiar in the background. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur by, my heart still half tied to that tent, that fire, that moment when his forehead pressed against mine. It would have been easy to doubt it all, chalk it up to altitude, booze, the illusion of isolation. But I didn't, because whatever had shifted between us felt too real to dismiss. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, honest, unmistakable. I glanced over at him. His eyes were focused on the road, lips pressed into a thoughtful line. The same Franklin I'd always known, and yet not. He caught me looking and gave me a small smile, then turned his attention back to the road. A few minutes later, we stopped at a red light on the edge of town. That's when it happened. Without saying a word, Franklin reached over and took my hand. Just like that. His thumb brushed gently against my knuckles. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just held it, casual but deliberate, like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like it was nothing, like it was everything. My heart thudded in my chest, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. I didn't want to. The light turned green and he let go, guiding the truck forward like nothing had happened. But we both knew something had. I looked down at my hand in my lap, still tingling from the weight of his touch, and I thought, this is new. But it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like coming home. We passed the town sign, and the familiar streets began to close in around us. The world we knew, the world that hadn't changed, was waiting for us, and yet somehow everything was different. He pulled into my driveway, the truck idling for a moment longer than necessary. Neither of us moved to open the door right away. I don't know what happens next, I said finally, breaking the quiet. Franklin looked at me, serious but not afraid. We don't have to figure it all out today. I nodded. Okay. He smiled. But we should do this again sometime, just you and me. I laughed under my breath, the sound surprising even me. Another mountain? He shrugged. Could be a lake next time, or just the backyard with a fire pit. I met his eyes. As long as it's with you. That got a smile out of him, not the usual goofy one. This one was smaller, quieter, real. I stepped out of the truck and grabbed my bag. He waited until I reached my front door before pulling away, our eyes meeting one last time through the window. No words, just that same look, steady, promising. And just like that, the world moved on. But I didn't walk inside the same man who'd left 2 days ago, because something had shifted between us. Something that couldn't be unseen, unheard, or undone, and for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare me. Back home, everything looked the same. The walls were still covered in framed memories. The coffee mug still sat on the counter where I'd left it. My bed was still unmade, like I'd never left, but I had. Something in me had shifted out there, on the trail, under the stars, in the quiet warmth of a sleeping bag that held 2 beating hearts instead of one. I sat on the edge of my bed, backpack still slumped by the door, and let the stillness of my apartment wrap around me. It wasn't the same kind of quiet we'd had on the mountain. This one felt heavier, a little lonelier, but also clearer, like the air after a storm. I thought about everything I hadn't said over the years. The small looks, the missed chances, the times I almost reached for his hand but stopped myself. I thought about how long I'd been afraid, not just of losing Franklin, but of being truly seen by him, of showing him the parts of me I kept hidden behind easy smiles and safe jokes. And now, he'd seen them. Maybe not all at once, maybe not fully, but enough to matter. I didn't know where we were. Heading. There was no neat label, no promise wrapped in a bow. But there had been something in the way he looked at me before I got out of the truck. Something in the way he said, "Just you and me," that told me the door was open now. Cracked wide enough to let something real begin. Love, I was learning, didn't always roar in. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it crept up on you during a hike, over burnt eggs, or in the quiet press of a forehead at midnight. Sometimes it took years to find its voice, but when it did, you knew. I'm still scared, still unsure, but I feel different now. Lighter, braver. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. I feel like maybe, just maybe, it's walking toward me too. And I think about the mountain, about the way the wind sounded between the trees, about the fire that crackled low into the night, about how he looked at me, not with confusion, not with fear, but with something gentle, curious, open. The mountain gave us silence, but in that silence, I finally heard the one thing I'd been waiting for, the sound of him choosing me.